Alizadeh is a British analyst, commentator, and journalist specializing in media production, narrative building, imperialism, and Iranian revolutionary history. He founded Jadal, an English and Persian language media platform that produces interviews and well-polished video essays explaining Iranian history and covering topics of resistance. His work during the recent hot war between Iran and the US has been so impactful that he was deplatformed from X 3 separate times to halt the spread of his work. He joins me in the studio today to discuss the recent war, the state of Iran's internal affairs, the ceasefire negotiations, and the resistance in Lebanon. It was an informative and insightful conversation that should expand your understanding of the current situation Iran finds itself in. So please join me in welcoming Ali Alizadeh in the live chat and drop a comment below. I want to get your thoughts on many different aspects of the war. But before I do, I want to just go back to the beginning. Were you surprised that the US and Israel launched this war together this year?
I was not surprised because all signals were indicating that we are approaching a military situation. The language which was used after the events of 8th and 9th of January in Iran exactly sounded like turning those things into false flag operation. So everything was building up towards an attack. But also everyone expected that they start this war with a big assassination. And the conversation was that said Ayatollah Khamenei will be assassinated. But nonetheless, yes, it was in the middle of the negotiation. And even though you know that Trump is going to surprise you, but then you do get surprised. I was surprised for the first 24 hours, but given the knowledge that we had built before, and given that it was the second time in less than 9 months, I think we, like many other Iranians, I got back into myself really quickly. So I remember I think in 18 hours I was producing program, giving analysis, and when I look back at them, many of them are sound. So it was not surprise because Iran experienced a very acute form of blitzkrieg in June 2025, and I think that was important. That prepared Iran for any such surprising attack to happen again. And that's why while in June 12 days war, it took about 8 hours for Iran to start its retaliation. And according to the news, it took about 6-7 hours for Ayatollah Khamenei to appoint commanders of IRGC and joint chief of staff. This time, they were all already been appointed before. So this time they had prepared themselves for a surprise attack, assassination, and they had already decided who's going to be the next commander of IRGC. If he gets killed, who is going to be the second next commander of IRGC? Who is the third next commander of IRGC? So they had prepared themselves for 4 or 5 layers of assassinations. Also, they had relegated some of the command to regional offices of IRGC and army, and so they had decentralized themselves. In a sense, I had heard this before, and I was a bit dubious, but this war proved it to be right. I had heard that from the end of 12 days war, Iranians was doing day and night work in anticipation of the next war coming. And I think they had not wasted a single minute. They had really prepared themselves, both in terms of ammunition, weaponry, receiving new form of weaponry from the allies, Russia and China, but also in terms of rebuilding the commands and also fixing some of the security and intelligence holes that they had.
So for me, I felt that the tactic or the strategy of the United States to simply apply sanctions and play games with the Iranian currency, inflation, and covert activities, I felt that was more effective because, in my view, that was something Iran couldn't really retaliate to in kind. So Iran intelligence capabilities obviously are not going to be comparable to the Mossad or the US intelligence. They would carry out maybe certain things, but for the most part, there is no parity. the only time Iran could really inflict damage is during a hot war. So I felt that it would be best if the United States just kept choking the country with sanctions and covert activity, propaganda, etc., etc. So it surprised me that they would go off of a working strategy, abandon it. I felt that it was a working strategy, abandon it, and then put Iran in a position where it can actually retaliate. So in your opinion, why do you think the US did that? Why did they abandon the sanctions and the covert activities and just escalate into a hot war and put Iran in a position where, even though they feign ignorance, they say, oh, we had no idea Iran would respond to our bases, but every general warned Trump, beforehand, and obviously they've had decades of war games, so they knew very well what Iran was capable of and what they would do. So why do you think they abandoned that strategy of the sanctions and put Iran in a position where it could actually fight back in a hot war?
It's a good question, but you have to remember it would be two situations in which they would continue with, as you said, forms of hybrid warfare, sanctions, and slowly and gradually exhaust the country from within, as we have seen in the last 14 years, one way or another, leading to events such as 8th and 9th of January, in which 3,000 people get killed, opposition claim 30,000, 40,000 are killed. There's a confusion in the nation, and the gap between nation and state is widening, leading to another set of problems, economy collapsing, the capital flight happens and everything else. And that's one way. But then if they would continue with that for how many years? 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, it still would not lead to full collapse of the state. Iranian Islamic Republic, Iranian state is very resilient, very plastic, as we have seen, and the proof of it during the 39 days war. So even if a massive war campaign cannot crush it completely, those slow sanctions and hybrid warfare and media warfare can cause trouble, but then is it enough to destroy the state altogether by 2035, by 2040? The reason I'm saying that is because Iranians think they are fighting against time, and they have the time on their hand. The history is on their hand, because remember, sanctions are appendix of dollar. Sanctions are dollar turned into a weapon. And so in 2030, dollar might not be the universal currency anymore. Dollar might have lost its ability to be used as a weapon. And so Iranians are buying time to reach 2030, to reach 2035, when other forms of currency comes, when yuan, RMB comes. And so Iran become unsanctionable. And so that's why in the other side, Israel and neocons in the United States and Trump administration, they thought they need to accelerate. Now Iran is on its knees. Now Iran has lost its main allies in Lebanon in terms of Hezbollah. Iraqi resistance is under pressure from within Iraqi resistance is under pressure from within Iraqi government. Iranian society is ripe for explosion and for some form of civil war situation. Now is the time to go. That's why Israel is an accelerator. Iranians are the accelerator. Iranians trying to buy time. That's why they opted for a strategic patience since 2019. They don't want to go on offensive mode. They think they don't need to do that. They just need to survive for another 5 years until their main enemy, which is not United States Army, which is not Israel, their main enemy, which is dollar, slowly subsides. It slowly becomes weaker and goes away. That's why I think Netanyahu thought that moment is the moment, and if they don't catch it, they have lost opportunity. Now, but let me just say something else, because the analysis, especially coming from the United States, from the alternative media, is America has lost this war, America has made a big mistake, America is taken hostage by Israel, and it's something that I have said myself as well, which is true. America as a state, as an empire, hasn't gained much in this war. However, I think it's different from Israeli point of view. I think Israel gains few points in this war. And so while this war was beneficial for Netanyahu and for Israel, it was not beneficial for the United States. And from my point of view, I think Trump and Netanyahu are not two different entities. Trump and Netanyahu have acted in unison and together. So Let me explain why. Because I think, from Israeli point of view, there was two main goals that they needed to achieve. If they could have achieved more in terms of damaging Iranian state or assassinating a layer of more revolutionary figures and allowing a more kind of pro-Western, kind of, we can call it pragmatists, but I call them like a defeatist elements to come to the leadership, that's another bonus. But the main two goals, which there still might be achieved, are one, denuclearization of Iran, and two, degrading Iranian military, economic, and political, social situation for the next 2, 3, 4 years, enough to allow Israel to continue its project in west part of Middle East. And so making Iran crippled enough so Iran cannot project its power, its fire into Lebanon, in Syria, in West Bank and other places. So Iran gets engaged with its own region, its own part of the world, and become troubled. So in that sense, this story is not finished yet. So if they manage, and that's a big if, and that's why they brought the negotiation, if they manage to stop Iran or inhibit Iran from continuing to be a threshold state. Threshold state means a state which is not nuclear, doesn't have nuclear weapon, but can reach nuclear weapon in 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks if it gets threatened by a nuclear state like Israel or America. And so Iran has been threshold state since 2003. And if they inhibit Iran from staying as a threshold state, Israel will be the only nuclear state in the region, number one. And two, if these problems inside Iran, especially the economic one, continues to come to the surface, Iran will not have much power to continue with the axis of resistance. That's the Israeli thinking. And so what will Israel do? Israel will, one, try to finish off the job in Gaza, as we've seen. Now they talk about 70% of land in Gaza to belong to Israel. Two, occupy south of Lebanon and create that buffer zone, or turn south of Lebanon into a new Gaza, as we have seen evidence for in the last 6 weeks, because they are not only bombing the houses, they bring bulldozers, they turn them uninhabitable for the next 5, 10 years. And third, then going to annex West Bank, then going for Golan Heights in Syria, and then starting to work the way in Syria and working on establishing David's corridor, which connects north of Israel all the way to Iraq's Kurdistan. And that makes Israel to have a land corridor to the back of Iran's border. That's Israel's long-term plan. And I think this war, which has damaged America and United States, damaged European Union, but has not been against this vision and this goal by Israel. So in a sense, why did they attack now? Because Israel has an accelerationist way. Why? Because Israel has always been an appendix of the United States, is a small bastard child of the United States, and daddy is getting old, is declining. The empire is declining. So now America can come and spend $70 billion for 39 days fun. In 3 years' time, does not have the ability to do so. In 5 years' time, does not have any ability to do so. So you need to drag United States and almost like pump its last drops of blood and milk it to maximum before the empire fully declines.
This is a very interesting point and very well explained. It kind of makes sense that it came shortly after what happened in Syria as well. To your point, the sanctions exhaust the society from within. And so in Syria, we saw that they basically hollowed out the tree, and then one blitzkrieg by the rebel forces out of Idlib, and they were able to just knock the entire tree down. And so their logic was probably, we had success in Syria, but also they thought maybe they could do the same thing in Iran. But what they discovered actually is how formidable the different layers of Iranian government and military and defense, their defense system is. So I want to actually ask you about the opening blow, because you talked about how the Ayatollah, as the supreme leader, has the authority and did carry out this authority of appointing multiple layers of inheritance of certain positions of power in order to produce this dead hand effect, as you say. Like, as soon as they get attacked, there is no confusion. Everyone knows what their role is and what happens next. However, what surprised me is how the supreme leader was in a position to be assassinated, that he wasn't secure in a position underground. And I get, people have pointed out he doesn't fear martyrdom, and that he wanted to be above ground and carry out his normal duties. But then why would so many people around him, because supposedly, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't just him who was assassinated on that day on the opening move. It was many people around him, high-level advisors, generals, etc. They have this meeting, and then they're all killed there. And then shortly after, we see Ali Larijani as well. He was quite vocal, and he was out in the streets knowing that he's a target. And then he was killed. And so while there were multiple layers, at the same time, I felt that it was a bit irresponsible, to put so many high-level officials and leaders in a position where they could all be assassinated together, because the health and the security of the state is dependent upon the sacrifice and the service of these people, but they need to be alive to do it. And so while the system is multi-layered and it is formidable, at the same time, it just begs the question, why was that even possible for so many people to be assassinated, on that opening move? So what do you make of that?
As I said, by 12 days war, Iranians opened their eyes into a new level of intelligence warfare from United States and Israel. And to be honest, they realized that it is way above their understanding. For the first few weeks, they couldn't even fathom how it has happened. Was it like through espionage within their networks, within the rank and files? Was it AI? Was it something else? And then slowly they realized it's a combination of information mixed with AI. Because, for example, when they killed the head of IRGC intelligence, at the same moment, they had attacked 3 other buildings, so altogether 4 buildings that made sense, because the Israelis thought he should be in one of these 4. And the speculation now is, the theory is, possibly by doing big data analysis mixed with spies, they analyzed the phone number of, not him because he didn't have a mobile, not his driver, he didn't have a mobile, but his driver's wife, his driver's wife's sister, his driver's wife's brother, his son's fiancé, a network of people around them. And so following their movements in a year, they could guess what it is, and they would guess he should be in one of these 4 places. That's number one. But nonetheless, these things are not to be fixed overnight. So there are 2 options. Either Iranians would raise their hand and say, guys, we don't want to have a fight until we fix our intelligence problems, or continue their lives. So, and if you have been to Iran, if you have lived in Iran, Iran is not the United States that you work on Zoom remotely. You have to be there. As a manager of a company, if you're not there, your workers don't work properly. So it's old-fashioned, it's traditional. So as a governor, as a minister, as the head of National Security Council, you have to be there, talk personally, one-to-one. So Larijani couldn't have disappeared into air. He had to run the country. That's why a week before he got assassinated, he walked on Al-Quds Day. So, but then when it comes to Ayatollah Khamenei, I have a speculation. I might be wrong. We have to wait for more information. Some people say, no, he was given guarantee. But when I look at what he said a week before he got killed, he compared himself with Imam Hussein, the 3rd Imam of Shiites. And he said, someone like me will not make allegiance to someone like Yazid. And Yazid being this tyrant, kind of immoral, unethical tyrant who ends up killing him. And that's number one. Number 2 is Ayatollah Khamenei was a significant character inside the state with a lot of power, but he was not someone who had the last say. Iran is a very complicated system with a lot of checks and balances, and institutions have enough power. Ayatollah Khamenei famously in February 2025 said negotiation with Donald Trump is not rational, is not honorable. He used the word honor, is not in line with our honor, and is not smart. And only a week later, Mr. Abbas Araghchi and the government of Pezeshkian went and sat down negotiating with Donald Trump, leading to assassination of many people and the starting of 12 days war. That wasn't enough for them to learn the lesson. They continued negotiating with the United States after that. And I think, in my opinion, which as I said, I might be wrong, I think that was Khamenei's last gambit. Khamenei felt his words are not getting through anymore. He needs to do something more. He needs to sacrifice something more. And I genuinely believe this war, with all the atrocities that the United States has done, Israel has done, with killing of children in Minab, with killing of those unarmed Navy people on Dena, it wouldn't have had the same reaction from Iran if Ayatollah Khamenei wasn't martyred on day one of this war. I'm sure the pro-Western faction in Iran, the pro-Western oligarchy in Iran, which was looking for any way to end the war as soon as possible and work against the military's demand, they would put more pressure. And it wasn't for Ayatollah Khamenei's blood spread among his base. It wasn't for millions of Iranians every single night mourning, protesting, chanting in the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, Mashhad, every tiny little town and village. I think Iran would not have allowed itself to project this much power. Because what happened in 39 days war showed us how much power Iran has. Iran has worked for this moment for many decades, but as a hybrid mixed system what we call uneven and combined development, it has other elements which constantly hold the hand back. So one hand with big muscles try to defend itself. The other hand, which is Iran's market, Iran's economy, Iran's stock market, the part of oligarchy who want to come and invest in London, Toronto, they have money in Dubai, they have joint venture with Qatar, they hold the hand back. And it wasn't for martyrdom of Khamenei, this other hand would not have put aside, at least for 39 days.
So you pointed out that people like Araghchi and others in Pezeshkian's government still did not learn their lesson. Even after the assassination of the Ayatollah, it seems like they still are willing to negotiate. What many people are wondering, is this incompetence? Is this brilliant diplomatic strategy? Or is this treachery? In your view, what is it?
Okay. I wouldn't use the word treachery. There are different elements in Iran. Iran is a multi-layered society, and the system as well has different factions, a multi-faction society, and is a very pluralistic society coming out of revolution. Is a live, organic situation. It's not about treachery, but different minds and different logics have been shaped in different time. Unfortunately, not only Abbas Araghchi, but Iran's foreign ministry as a whole has been shaped in the event of post-1990. So in 1980, there was war, but then most diplomats came out of 1990 collapse of Soviet Union and the beginning of unilateral moment. Many of them studied in United States or in United Kingdom. They studied constructivism as kind of a school of international relations. They didn't study realism. They were somehow not brainwashed, but they were exposed to theories which had come out of this this moment of unilateralism of the United States. That's number one. Number two is Iran is a country which has experienced 14 years of sanctions. 16 years of sanctions, and I'm talking about heavy sanctions. Otherwise, one or other form of sanctions Iran has experienced for 47 years. But heavy, crippling sanctions, cutting Iran's relation to SWIFT, making it impossible for anyone to move $100 to Iran or from Iran has been for 16 years now. And sanctions have a very specific characteristic. They metamorphosize you from within. They gnaw you from inside. They empty you out from gallantry, from will to fight, from being offensive. They make you very defensive, and they make you, at best, opt for survival. So I wouldn't call it treachery, I just call it different logic. So when Donald Trump would say, I will destroy your infrastructure, Army, IRGC would say, do it. We retaliate. We destroy the infrastructure of every single country in the region. Let it come. We don't care. But then those people who own the infrastructure, because remember, Iran has gone through 20 years of privatization, and these infrastructures are not national. Most of them have actual owners. Start putting pressure on the government. Start putting pressure on media, on public opinion. And they have power. They have power, and the state has experienced their power to sabotage, to push the state in the other way. Iran is a country coming out of 4 or 5 big political crises. 2009, part of this pro-Western oligarchy was not happy, and so it engineered green movement, which was very damaging for the state. A big part of young middle-class population lost their belief in the state and became oppositional. 2019, 2022, woman life freedom. So 2026, January. So in a sense, this oligarchy has some power, and the state has to constantly mediate between different factions, because Iran is not a resistance guerrilla force. It's a state with $600-700 billion a year GDP, with 92 million population, a very educated population. To my opinion, overeducated population, because the state put all of them into university without thinking about jobs and about the fact that they all will have higher demands later, and that was not proper social management of this. So in a sense, they have to balance between, they have to juggle between all different things. So it's not treachery, but when there was 39 days of war, the military, the IRGC, was behind the wheel, and we saw Iran drove like a Formula One, first class, played like Premium League. And then after 39 days, they said, please get off, commanders, get off from the wheel, and now give the car to politicians, to diplomats, and the country went into a more normal situation. During the war, you had flight and fight. And so the society acted differently as well. You had all the pro-revolutionary forces, the base on the streets. You've been to Iran, you saw that. The country was in the hand. From the day of ceasefire, they tried to normalize the situation. And in the normalized situation, other demands came up. Now you have 1.5 million, 2 million more unemployed. Now about 30% of Iranians use internet one way or another for their income, for their work. And there's no access to internet. So there is this uncertainty. So in this environment of post-ceasefire, those voices who come and talk about normalization, end of war, going back to de-escalation, will get more credit from part of society as well. So in a sense, I don't think it was treachery, it was different logic. And this logic has always existed. And Ayatollah Khamenei always balanced between these different logics, between pro-revolutionary and realist voices and so-called pro-Western neoliberal voices. And I think for 39 days, his blood allowed the pro-resistance forces to get the upper hand. And this is slowly subsiding.
So that's a bit concerning, the way you just ended that statement there, because from the view from many on the outside, and I'm speaking just mainly as someone who observes this with interest, obviously I understand how it sounds for us who aren't Iranian outside of Iran to say, hey, keep fighting, hey, you keep struggling, you keep dying. It's not really fair to say from a position of privilege or safety or security. However, for many people, it's like, you're not just your leader, but your spiritual leader, your revolutionary leader. This is like the George Washington of your civilization. And he's killed. and that's it, just 39 days, and you take out radars, but that's it. Israel continues to exist, business as usual, keeps doing what it's doing. The United States, gas prices have gone up, and that's not good. But it wasn't this catastrophic event that many people believed it could have and should have been. Like the Strait of Hormuz, it was always described, once this is closed, gas will become $12, $13 a gallon, and the world economy will come to a halt. And I know it's still early, there's the potential, and we're going to see it if this continues over the next month or two. Gas prices will, get even higher than they are now, which are unsustainable. But I think the perception for many was it was cut a little too short. And you raise a good point, an important point. I've thought about this as well. You have conflicting interests. There's the interest of the revolution, the ideology of the revolution, which has certain ideas, but then you have the interests of the nation, and it has certain ideas. And so there's going to be alignment at times, and much of the time there's going to be conflict. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess the revolutionary ideas, foreign policy ideas are going to be, Israel needs to be defeated, Zionism needs to be rooted out from the region, the United States military installations need to be completely removed as well. But this seems to conflict with, I don't want to say the nation's interest, but at least with, the foreign ministry, which people also wonder, I think myself included, why were they allowed to live when so many others were assassinated? So I also don't want to suggest treachery, that could be an objective that the Mossad or the United States CIA has to produce paranoia internally so you have conflict. But do you think that these ceasefire negotiations right now are actually in the interests of the Iranian state and the revolution, or do you think that there's a conflict in that this is a mistake, the way they're going about the negotiations?
Well, first of all, there's no difference from my point of view between revolutionary interests and national interests. And people in Iran have learned that. So supporting resistance in Lebanon is not revolutionary, is also 100% in line with Iran's national interests. Same way that supporting Iran for Lebanese is not revolutionary, is in line with Lebanese national interests. Because we are in a region occupied by imperialism and its rabid dog, Israel, and we are not strong enough to fight back single-handedly, we all have common destiny, and we all have to fight together. Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, if they wake up from this Erdogan's delusion, and only using rhetoric, Iraq and the rest of them, and Yemen. So in a sense, this is for every nation to exist in this region, they need to be united. They need to be in an axis of resistance. So that's number one problem. Number two, let me just be frank, and I'm very happy that you asked this question because this is in many people's mind, and they don't want to do that because they feel it's intervening in a resisting country. And I think from what a non-Iranian stands, you have something called Iran, and you see the actions of Iran as a whole. And these actions, there is some consistency, there is some inconsistency. The consistency is this country has been, with no exception, no flaw, supporting Palestine from day one of revolution on 11th of February 1979. No other state in the region, no other country in the region has done so. So not the pan-Arab countries, not the Arab nationalists, Arab socialists, even Assad's family in Syria. No, Iranian state from 79 has been always been with Palestine, 100%, both in words and in acts. So that's consistency. Then the second one is they've always been preparing themselves to defend the sovereignty against the United States. No exception. So, and they paid a very, very heavy price for that, including sanctions, including 2 wars so far, including Soleimani being assassinated, General Bagheri being assassinated, Hijazi being assassinated, now Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader, being assassinated. And so again, these are all consistency. But at the same time, is a modern state, as I said, which with many people educated, becoming more secular, urbanization has been very fast, too fast due to revolution, is a country with a lot of contradictions. These contradictions make the country difficult to be managed. There is also a big capitalist oligarchic class, which unfortunately has been traditionally inclined to be with the West, not with the East. Because you ask yourself why the oligarchy doesn't work with China, with Russia, with Brazil, with Indonesia. Why do they have to be in the West? Because they trust the West more. They think if they earn $1 billion, they want to invest $500 million in London, not in Shanghai. Mistaken, because now you saw in the war, actually, Germany and Britain immediately came to confiscate their houses, their monies of the Iranian oligarchs. So these things together make some of the Iranian actions unfathomable and difficult to be analyzed for an outsider. But I would say from outside, people should support Iran as a resisting state as a whole. We from inside Iran are acting differently, and there's a battle inside Iran as well. There's a battle against Israel, the United States, and those who support them. There's a battle against those factions who are echoing their demands. Yeah? And I can give you a narrative, but I think people outside Iran should not get involved in this narrative much. So if you talk to people in Lebanon, they say, we trust Iran. They don't say we trust IRGC or Supreme Leader. They say we trust Iran as a way of respecting the fact that every country has its internal issues. But however, let me explain this one. We've seen this very clear action. IRGC and the army have zero complexity about that. They are willing to fight back all the way. Yeah? There's no doubt. And they have a clear vision which was set up by Ayatollah Khamenei. United States troops out of the region, referendum in Israel. Yeah, end of story. Yeah, it might be some question of like tactic that we don't want to enter the war now, or we wait to be attacked first. But they have prepared themselves. There's no doubt for that. However, the Pezeshkian faction, they have a very different worldview, and that worldview is shared by part of Iran's population. So you cannot push that population out of the country. It's like big. They're like 17 million people voted for Pezeshkian. They are not treacherous. Their mind has been shaped over years. So many of these people mentality have been shaped in 1990s by reform movement, by civil society language, etc. You cannot. So you have to like mediate between them. However, at the moment, the situation is drastically and qualitatively different. For the first time, the pro-revolutionary, pro-resistance movements and many layers of Iranian normal society who you go, they are dressed liberally, they are secular, but they join this pro-resistance movement. You see many women with a hijab who come on the street every day and holding Khamenei's picture. They have woken up to the fact that we're not going to survive. If we want to be survived, we need to resist. We need to resist. So in a sense, it's magical how this war plus Khamenei's martyrdom, in a sense, nullified and destroyed 3 decades of American propaganda on Iranian youth. Look at them. Iran has been surrounded by so many TV channels, by Instagram influencers employed by Mossad and by CIA, so in a sense, it's been like the country has been bombarded by so much propaganda, sanctions added to it, internal contradictions rising, etc. And then in comparison with any other decade, I think for the first time, pro-resistance forces have a better chance to change the balance of power inside Iran. And nonetheless, look at that. Ayatollah Khamenei got killed. Many of these pro-Western forces were hoping to appoint a more so-called moderate leader, but his son has been appointed. And his son is much more, I think, is more revolutionary than the father. You ask me why? Because the father was appointed in the moment of America's rising to the throne as the only empire. His son is coming when America is declining. His son has lost 7 members of his family: his father, mother, wife, sister, brother-in-law, daughter, niece, nephew. So he has much more steadfast waiting for this. That's number one. And the revolutionary forces of the base have been revived. Before, they would come to Friday prayer, to anniversary of revolution once a year, and would just only chant in support of the state. Now they go to the street every day. It's like a big agora, and they disagree with some of the decisions made by the diplomats, by Ghalibaf. Ghalibaf says our focus is on taking Iran's blocked money. The people on the streets say, no, we want Lebanon. We want intervention in Lebanon. So in a sense, this war revived revolutionary situation at the social level, and that's unprecedented in the last 3-4 decades.
Speaking about the Ayatollah's son, is he even alive, really? This is a controversial question, I'm sure, but we haven't
It's not controversial.
We haven't seen a picture of him alive. We haven't seen video of him alive. We have only heard statements that he may or may not have written that are read to the public through the media. So I know this might be scary for people to even consider, but is he even alive?
No, it's not controversial. People constantly talk about that. But look at that. We have a record of Iran's behavior. Iranians might sometimes take the truth out of public arena for 24 hours, 48 hours, the longest 72 hours, but there is no, because of the factional fighting inside the state, there is no possibility, even if they wanted, even if they didn't have the morality, but even if they wanted, there's no possibility of taking such truth outside the public arena. Someone would have leaked it out. Look at that. When Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah got martyred, the Lebanese resistance and Iranians as their allies could have kept it away from the public for at least a week or two for the benefit of the war, for the benefit of resistance. Many countries do that. When your commander is martyred, is killed, you are not obliged to go and tell everyone immediately to break the morale of your soldiers. But they said that 18 hours later. When Ayatollah Khamenei got martyred, they could easily have said he's hiding. There was no need for them to come and tell the truth. But they said that with 12 hours delay. And when Iran mistakenly shot the Ukrainian aeroplane back in 2020, in January 2020, which possibly was due to America's jamming of Iran's radar, they kept the truth away for 2 days. On the third day, Ayatollah Khamenei famously said, go and tell the nation and pay the price for that. We don't keep away the truth from the people. So it would not be possible, because imagine if in a month's time they come and say, oh, now Ayatollah Khamenei's son doesn't exist. They would lose a big part of their base. They would lose that 15 million people who are the bone of this country. And look at that. I think especially the more revolutionary part of the state has learned the lesson, given what happened in January, that Trump wanted to bring people on the street, resist opposition on the street, and have civil war. If it wasn't the base of a state, Islamic Republic would have collapsed, despite all these drones, all these missiles, all these technologies. So they need their base, and they are coming out of their base. So they don't do anything that can drastically destroy the trust of the base.
When do you think we'll be able to hear from the new leader?
I've heard that they are preparing themselves for Ayatollah Khamenei's funeral in 2 weeks' time, which to me is bad news, because burying down Ayatollah Khamenei, that apparently not much left of his body due to explosion, is almost, it might be looking to have a byproduct, which is calming down the mourners, calming down his followers, and slowly de-escalating the tension, which would be a mistake, because from Trump's and Netanyahu's position, the tension can start any moment, and that would be suicidal. I think any attempt by Iranian state to normalize the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to give a signal to end the war episode is a big mistake and is walking into Trump and Netanyahu's trap. And so this burial. So if this burial ever happens in 2 weeks' time, possibly that will be the first occasion that we have to see from Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei.
You know, obviously I've been asking questions from a more critical or paranoid perspective. But I will say that, you know, obviously for myself and many others, while there are concerns around the time in which they engaged in the ceasefire negotiations, before that actually Iran fought valiantly and really impressed the world, and I think gave a lot of pride to the Muslim world, Sunnis included. We saw that there was this opportunity, the renewed discussions around unity, you know, bringing an end to the Sunni Shia sectarianism, rejecting that kind of propaganda because people view their true enemy as Israel. For a long time, especially because of the conflict in Syria, you know, this was very difficult for people to even discuss and think about, you know, and so it produced a lot of animosity and distrust, and a lot of it was pointed at Iran. But many people that I've seen who were Sunnis, who were critical of Iran, actually came out and showed support for Iran and said, no, it doesn't matter if they're Shia or not, like they're still Muslims and the real enemy is Israel. And I think a lot of Muslims, so there was that moment of unity, but also they took pride in the fact that there is a Muslim state willing to fight back and can actually do a good job of doing it. And so when you think about, since October 7th, all this time just watching the resistance fight on their own, outmatched, outgunned, just being completely slaughtered, you know, this I think wounds the pride of people and makes them just feel weak. But then when you see finally, you know, a nation that does have the ability stand up to a bully and fight back and do so, you know, brilliantly. I mean, they were very precise so they brought a lot of pride, I think, back to the Muslim world. And so I just want to point that out because a lot of people, I think, were impressed, and rightfully so. I wanted to go to Iran. One of the reasons was because I viewed this as a major historic event, that in the future people will look back at this war, whichever direction it goes, whether Iran wins or loses, they'll view this as a very important world that changes the course of history, not just in the region, but the entire world. And so for me, I wanted to take my camera and go document that so people can look back and see what was it like during that time. And I saw the people on the streets. Like, I was very inspired by the Iranian people who every night they came out and they showed support for their government, support for their military, defending the nation, supporting one another, giving each other food and drink. And it was incredible to witness. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity. So I did just want to point that out because most of the podcast discussion so far has been kind of like critical and
No, it's not. Let me just explain this one. I mean, it's good that you brought it up. No, I mean, as part of Muslim world, as part of global South, Iran or any nation resisting imperialism, they have to be clever. The way that these imperialists had strategic patience for many centuries. The United States didn't become United States overnight. They were patient. They avoided many wars in like beginning of 20th century. They were only partially present in First World War. And then when the moment arrived, look at China, how China is rising to become an empire by being patient. So having patience, being strategic and not risking too much and having a longer vision of history is a positive thing. We don't want to like only like martyrdom seeking people go into the into battle after battle and then get perished, and then people can have romantic stories about us. So in a sense, as the fact that Iran is a strategic player and can decide with carefulness, that's a positive thing. However, every situation has revolutionary and counter-revolutionary forces come together. Every situation is a battle. Someone from inside Iran look at the anti-Zionist movement in the West and says, guys, 7th of October, almost 2.5 years ago, why didn't you destroy the credibility of Israel? Why didn't you go to more demonstrations? Why did you only march up and down the streets in demonstrations? Why didn't you do more civil disobedience? Why didn't you disrupt the production of arms which was being sent on Palestinians' heads? Why didn't you do more of like Palestinian action style thing, etc., etc.? So they can have the criticism of the movement, pro-Palestine and anti-Zionist movement in the United States, in Europe, and in UK. But I would tell them that they have their own limitations. There is a step forward, a step backward. They are like different colors because they had to bring so many factions. Some of them were more conservative, some of them were more militant. Same is in Iran. But nonetheless, this should not distract us from the fact that a global South country, a Muslim country, under 48 years of endless pressure, 14 years of the harshest sanctions in the world, 12 days war, this war, assassination and decapitation of about 20 of its main leaders, brought America down to its knees and didn't allow Israel to achieve what they claimed. Look at that. I'm telling you that Israel has other goals. I'm telling you that we can win more. I'm telling Israel thought they can defeat Iran. Iran has survived, and that's a victory for Iran. I'm critical because I think Iran can achieve more. I'm critical because I think the time has arrived that we can go from defensive to offensive. We can go from survivalist mode to gaining more. And I think the time has arrived. And the people inside Iran have demanded that. And different set of sentiments has arisen inside Iran. And so we should change the balance of forces. Inside Iran, Khamenei has spoken clearly before he got martyred, and we should follow his path, and we can achieve much more. So, but this is not in contradiction with the fact that Iran achieved a lot in that 39 days war. And that was the most humiliating moment for United States, more humiliating than Vietnam. It took 10 years for United States to get such a defeat in Vietnam. It took 39 days for United States to be defeated here. Look at that. When United States went to Iraq, it was a massive, easy victory after 3 weeks. And it took about 4 years for the United States to realize that's a quagmire. On day 3 or 4, I think, Trump realized, oh my God, that's such a big mistake. I wish I had never entered into this situation. So in a sense, I'm saying that Zionism is cancer, and is cancer in the period of its metastasis. So we have to be more offensive. We have to be more proactive. We should not only wait back and defend ourselves. That's a difference of opinion. But again, this is not in any way in contradicting the fact that America was humiliated and Iran achieved a massive victory, which is inspiring for every other nation in Global South and in West Asia.
Very well said. That's an excellent point. So, given what you're saying now, Iran should be more assertive and transition from a defensive posture to an offensive one, or at least counterpunch more often. What do you think then should happen in Lebanon? Everyone is focused on Lebanon now. We've seen the resistance in Lebanon do a very good job introducing this new weapon that we've never seen them use before. If you pay attention to Russia-Ukraine, everyone has seen the FPV drones that can't be jammed or detected because they're operating on these fiber optic wires that can travel great distances. We didn't see Hezbollah use that last year or the year before. We saw them fight a very different way. In a short period of time, they were able to transition to learn how to produce these weapons en masse, but then also fly them and use them. And just in the first couple of weeks, we saw very shaky footage. The drone is not as accurate when it delivers, but in just 2 weeks, it seems like the same drone operators are surviving and they're getting better and better at flying. They've done a good job fighting in a completely new way, asymmetric warfare, and they're able to harass the IDF. At the same time, though, they are still taking a pummeling, and now it's gone from southern Lebanon all the way up to potentially Beirut. So, and I think there were IDF troops that crossed the Litani River. And so now we're seeing Iran come out yesterday and they respond through these statements and said, this is a red line for us. What is happening exactly in Lebanon, and what do you think Iran should be doing?
I mean, what Iran has done, I say as an Iranian, is too little, too late. And I personally feel indebted to Lebanese resistance. They lost so many lives. They lost so many brave young people since 7th of October for Gaza, for the region, for everyone. And I think everyone in the region owes to Lebanese resistance and Lebanese people, because we owe them our sovereignty. If the whole region hasn't fallen into this Zionist cancer, is partially because of Lebanese resistance. I think Iran on the moment of ceasefire, issued 10-point demand, which was ratified by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, and one of them was ceasefire in all fronts. They didn't say ceasefire in Beirut, they said all fronts in Lebanon. And I think Netanyahu was clever enough, quickly came out and said ceasefire on Beirut. We will not attack Beirut, south of Beirut. I think Iran should have moved out of negotiation on that day and should have penned that negotiation to ceasefire on Lebanon. I think is unacceptable. Very, from realist point of view, is unacceptable and very short-sighted and bad decision to not having taken a very firm stance much earlier when Iran had more leverage about ceasefire in Lebanon, not Beirut. Now that the fact that Ghalibaf, Mohsen Rezai and all other figures in Iran have come out and say, we are reaching the end of our patience, and why? And Netanyahu think, okay, so the patience is not crossed when we occupy all of South Lebanon, all the way to Litani River, crossing Litani River, trying to get Nabatiyam, trying to take Tyre. So they're fine with that, only south of Beirut. And that's like a bad message to Israelis. And I'm surprised what Iranians are doing. And remember, on day 39 of the war, which was day 1 of ceasefire, Trump has not imposed its blockade yet. So Iran had much more leverage. So the more we came from ceasefire, Iran stayed static where it was before, holding and choking Strait of Hormuz, but then United States imposed the blockade, started like growing more, and constantly playing with Iran's red lines, trying to transgress the red line to see how serious Iran is. 4 days ago, they killed 4 Iranian soldiers in Bandar Abbas. 3 days ago, they killed 2 soldiers in Qeshm Island. Yesterday, they attacked Sirik Island and they destroyed Iranian radars. Why? Because Iran had attacked a drone, MQ-1, coming on top of Iran, and they said, oh no, that was international waters. Yeah? In normal situations, Iran would have retaliated so strong that it could have restored the deterrence. And I think Iran has acted short of restoring its deterrence, and that's bad message to the United States and Israel.
So why are they doing that?
I think because this negotiation tied their hands from behind. Because Iran has very strong military who has learned every little thing in art of fighting by losing brothers in the war with Iraq in 8 years war, with Saddam, in the battlefield. And they are, as I said, they are premium league. They are Formula One. They are top class, world class. When it comes to diplomacy, I think Iran is still doesn't have enough confidence. Art of diplomacy is something else. Iran is acting like a third world country. They can get deceived. And then also the pressure from other factions in the state is coming up.
How can you still, I mean, this can't be an excuse anymore. Like a couple of years ago maybe, but after all this, still being deceived? I mean, when are they going to learn their lesson, the diplomats?
It's not diplomats only, as I said, the politicians behind diplomats who put the pressure. The fear that going back to the war, wars are short these days, 39 days war. Wartime is okay, because in wartime people can open the door to each other's neighbors, people eat less, economy is fine. Surprisingly, Iran had 0 inflation during the war. Dollar prices went down rather than coming up. So in 39 days of war, things were fine, because as I said, flight and fight mode. But the question is, if it's like 5 years war, like Second World War and other things, you could have survived. So you wouldn't worry much about economy because people's demands have subsided. People are more patient. They don't ask for a job and other things. But if you have another like 18 days war with the United States, in which many of your infrastructures are being bombed, your economy going down again, and then on day 19, what do you want to do? How you want to manage your society? That's why the fear in the politicians and decision makers' mind is about that. It's about being left with a ruined economy, with ruined infrastructure in which they cannot repair it. So, and especially if they cannot sell oil properly, how are you going to pay your public sector? How are you going to pay your others? But again, I think it's wrong. Iran has enough resilience. If they have more bravery, you can always rebuild the infrastructure. That's my message for them. So in a sense, what I'm telling you is not treachery, it's not two different rationale. And these rationales, during the war, one of them was had the last say. Now the war is finished, this one is becoming more kind of resonated. So I'm telling them, you can build the infrastructure, you can bring even foreign investment if you fight this war to the end and get into a stability. Because remember, what America and Israel have done with these wars and before with sanctions is to create uncertainty about Iran. No one can predict how Iran's economy will act in 6 months' time, in a year time, in 2 years' time. Will it be another war? Will it be some skirmishes? Will it be some assassination? And in that uncertain situation, no one can invest and no one can rebuild the infrastructure. So I think, from my point of view, from a realist point of view, it will be much more beneficial for Iran to fight this war all the way to the point that it could have restored its deterrence and would have stopped there. And I think, once again, Iran stopped much shorter than restoring its deterrence.
Yeah, I agree with you. It sounds like the issue needs to be settled once and for all. But I guess if I were to play devil's advocate or just to consider the perspective of someone like Arakshi, I think it makes sense to take a brief pause. Maybe they believe deep down the war will continue again, whether it's next month or in 3 months, and so there's extra things they need to do to make sure they're prepared for that. And because we know, I personally don't believe there will ever be a deal. I think whatever deal there will be, the Zionists will break it. Whether that's with or without Trump's consent, the Zionists will find a way to break it and undermine it. And there's 2.5 years left of Trump's administration. I think Iran has to survive the entire administration. And so perhaps, this is a temporary pause. They'll pretend to go along with negotiations to give Trump what he wants, to show the media, oh, I'm talking to them. But perhaps they are preparing. And in a short period of time, you can make a lot of change, right? And we saw from the 12-day war how much more accurate the drones and missiles became just by making simple changes and collaborating more with the Chinese, maybe using their systems and getting information from their satellites, et cetera, et cetera. So perhaps that's what this is. It's just another break before our next round.
I know, but again, we are not there to have all the informations. And I'm sure when me and you are only looking at 2 or 3 factors, the decision makers are looking at 50 factors. Yeah? And so with all the information they have, we didn't know much about Iran. Did you know about Iran's missile cities and the fact that you have underground transport facilities inside, under the mountains, etc. before this war? We didn't know. So there are things that we don't know about Iran, like we don't know about Britain and other countries as well. However, I think in this loss and gain, in this calculation, from 12 days war to 39 days war, they made their weaponry much more accurate. They possibly received satellites from China. They had some exchange with Russia and etc. However, in this interim time, they had massive riots on January as well, which was like a big blow to their face. That was a heavy as well. So they might have gained something, but they also have lost something. Yes. In this interim time, I'm sure they're rebuilding the missile cities. Already the satellite images show the one in Qazvin they had in Talegan. They are opening the missile cities, the bombed entrance, etc. But also a big part of south of Lebanon is occupied already. That's a big loss. That's an unacceptable big loss while they are waiting in Qatar and they're talking about unfreezing $6 billion. That's a big joke, man. $6 billion in Iran is like 2 corruption cases that judiciary should have dealt with. That's not acceptable. So in a sense, if their eyes is fully open and they're buying time, preparing themselves for the next round, yes, but then my question would be, how did you allow or facilitate the occupation of south of Lebanon? Because that's a big blow. I know that Hezbollah is very resilient. I've made a documentary about them after martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan, and I show how resistance in Lebanon organically came to existence out of the material condition, and so is not going to be destroyed. And with FPV, without FPV, they always can come with with a piece of a stone. They can always like fight back. But then freeing this piece of land may take years. This is the south of Lebanon was liberated with thousands of martyrs in 80s, 90s, and then they finally in 2000 they liberated it. And now Israel coming advanced so far is unacceptable. And people ask in the region why Iran didn't do more. And let me just be very frank. Many people in Iran talk about we should close Bab al-Mandab again, internationally as well. But look at that. People in the region, people in other parts of axis of resistance ask themselves, if we join the war and kind of put whatever we have in this war in support of the rest of axis, will we end up like Lebanon? And Iran will not do as much as we did for them? This is important. The optic is not very good for Iran at the moment, because part of resistance forces, they have this endless faith in Iran and they never have criticism. I've been interviewing people in the last few days. But part of ordinary Lebanese are asking why Iran hasn't done more. So I'm sure in Yemen the same question is coming, watching this story developing, saying that, okay, if we would have closed Bab al-Mandab and US would start bombing every little infrastructure that we have, would Iran come and help us? Or no, Iran would say they are capable of defending themselves. Because either we are all acting in unison and we all fight one for all for one, or if Iran's equations are different, we are becoming more prudent too. We are starting thinking a bit more pragmatically, and we are starting acting more in line with strategic patience. That's what Yemenis are thinking at the moment. And that's not good, because you know that we can only win this war against imperialism and Zionism if we truly act like axis of resistance. And so I personally think Iran should do much more about Lebanon, all of Lebanon, not about Beirut. And that's the demand of Iranian people every single night on the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, and other places. Every little signage that kids keep, young people keep, elderly are keeping, are asking why we are not fighting alongside Lebanese resistance right now.
That's an excellent point, and it makes a lot of sense, actually. On the one hand, the axis of resistance being decentralized respects the sovereignty of each member. A lot of people like to say, oh, Hezbollah is just a proxy of Iran, and people who are supportive of the resistance or Lebanese, they become insulted when they hear them. We're not their proxy. We are allies. We think for ourselves. We act for ourselves. We don't make decisions because Iran told us to. So the decentralization respects that kind of independent sovereignty. Hamas can carry out October 7th if they want, with or without the approval or permission or green lighting from Iran, for example. But the double-edged sword of that respect for sovereignty and that decentralization is, like you say, you have certain groups who do what they can when they can if they want to. So when you look at all of their capabilities, it's very impressive what Ansarullah can do in Yemen. It's very impressive what Hezbollah can do in Lebanon. It's very impressive what Hamas was able to do. It's very impressive what Iran is able to do. If they had all done it together, which is what Israel was assuming, that on October 7th there was some confusion, I think, from the Zionists about whether or not Iran was, that this was one big coordinated action or strategy. And in the north, they cleared the settlements because there was belief that Hezbollah might also carry out a cross-border raid the way Hamas did. So, of course, we found out that wasn't the case, that Hamas had acted independently, and there may have been knowledge, but not necessarily coordination. Had there been coordination, honestly, I don't know if Israel could have survived it. They could have suffered a catastrophic defeat a lot sooner. So that's an interesting point that you raised. I want to ask you now, I guess we can end with this. We're hearing from certain analysts and commentators online who have connections to the Western intelligence community. They are saying that Iran, at some point in the next month or two, will leave the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, which will free them to announce that they have a nuclear weapon and that they may or may not have received assistance from a foreign country. Either they already received the bomb or they've learned how to build it, or they have built it, whatever the case is going to be. Do you think Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon soon?
It's a $1 million question, and I genuinely don't know. As I said, what we've seen here in Iran is the tale of two cities, and so the same people who did not want to end negotiation on day one after ceasefire, because Israel was bombing Lebanon and killed 300 people on that Black Wednesday, the same people possibly will do whatever they can to inhibit Iran's becoming nuclear. But the question of becoming nuclear is becoming much more rational and much more sensible for a big part of Iranian society who were against it before, because under endless Western propaganda bombardment, many people thought in Iran that this is a futile project. We neither become nuclear power nor abandoning it, and so we don't have development, we don't have like economic prosperity, etc., because of this like enrichment. But they realize now that Israel is a genociding state, which also has access to 300 warhead. Trump, thank God, because he doesn't do the same facade that other American presidents do, made it easier for Iranian public to understand and see the real face of United States, a kind of genocidal man who killed Iranian Navy people and bragged about it to be fun, a man who didn't even apologize for killing 168 children in Minab school, and he said he wants to destroy Iranian civilization, not the Islamic Republic of Iran. So in a sense, the demand for Iran to build nuclear bomb and become a nuclear power is much higher at the moment. And I personally think from rationalist point of view, it is suicidal for Iran not to have it. Anything else that Iran does, and we are all praising Iran for its resistance and saying they've done a massive work with their asymmetrical warfare and their logical fighting, and all of them are great. But in a region that you have Israel, a country which has shamelessly conducted genocide and brags about it and is a nuclear power, if you don't have nuclear, you may not collapse, they may not defeat you, but you cannot have a safe environment for progress, for development, and for stability. So do we want Iran to be constantly resisting for the next 40 years? Yeah, you can, but then you cannot develop. If you want to develop, if you want to become a prosperous country, you need something more than that. And I think this is like a critical moment. But based on my understanding, because even though Ayatollah Khamenei is martyred, but the fatwa is still around, Iran will not become nuclear until the words of nuclear threat are pronounced by an enemy. Because based on Sharia law, I'm not a Sharia expert, but apparently if they openly threaten Iran.
But they have. I mean, Trump said he'll destroy Iranian
that was short
civilization.
of open threat. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he talked about the glow, the big glow,
Yeah.
but he hasn't used the word. But if they would really, genuinely threaten Iran by nuclear explosion, Iran has the moral right to become nuclear as well itself. So the next couple of months are very open. So let me just kind of conclude with this. This is not a war game that we are watching. It's not a PlayStation game that Iran has to fight, Hamas has to fight. There are organic societies, organic communities with many different factions under decades of military action, military bombardment, economic sanctions, social deviations by propaganda warfares, and social normal contradictions. So it's complicated, but the fight is open. And inside Iran as well, there's a big fight happening between those forces who want independence, who want sovereignty, and who wants to push America out of the region, and who want to fight back against Zionism to the end, and those forces which are more timid or more pro-Western or more brainwashed or more conservative and scared of doing so. The thing is, colonialism is a strong thing. Uprooting it from your land is easy. Uprooting it from your mind is much more difficult job.
I think that's an excellent way to end the discussion. Alizadeh, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here in the studio to discuss Iran and this war, and for educating my audience. I want to point people towards your work. So obviously, you're no longer on Twitter. You've been deplatformed several times. And I think it's because of the impact and the influence that your work has on the minds of not just millions of Iranian people, but I think millions of people in the Western world as well, non-Iranians that are interested in learning more about this. You have a media platform that you founded, Jadal, and you have it in Farsi and Persian language. You have it in English, and you do interviews and live streams, which are all impactful and beneficial. But your video essays, I think, are what really make Jadal special. And I was, as an editor myself, people consider my videos to be a bit flashy. I am always looking for elements that I can't produce on my own that I can legally fairly borrow from other people. And so I came across Jadal, of course, and I was very impressed by the production work. And it was just well scripted, well paced, and just a clean production.
They can go to my YouTube channel, Jadal English, and there, as you said, the explainer videos are very useful, especially the one about Hezbollah, about how Iran became drone and missile superpower that were all made before this war, but explain what's the situation. And there's one more coming called Khamenei's Last Gambit, yeah? And also, I mean, for those who speak Farsi, I'm on Telegram and on Instagram and others, but hopefully soon I will be in Substack. But also, let me just use this opportunity to thank you for going to Iran, not only once, twice, in the environment that there's so much fear has been created by United States government for anyone traveling to that part of the world. And I think that itself is an act of resistance to go there, because we all have things to lose. When you go back to the States, they may stop you at the airport. They may deplatform you from here and there. Part of your income may be affected. By daring to go and standing by those people while the war had not been finished, I think that was an excellent act of solidarity. And I hope more journalists just go to Iran, talk to normal, ordinary Iranians. Iran has been ghettoized by the West for a long time. And so just seeing people and seeing themselves being represented in the West, not by CNN and Fox News, but by genuine, independent voices, I think it gives them it heightens their morale and helps them to fight back for the next episode of war. So let me thank you thank you for your trip to Iran, and also the great work that you've done, especially since 7th of October, for every part of Axis of Resistance.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you, and I did consider it an act of solidarity at the very minimal to provide, because obviously my career is possible because of the suffering of other people. I've benefited materially quite a bit, and that's always kind of made me feel guilty. You know, there's this concept of survivor's guilt from everyone who witnessed the genocide and witnessed, you know, the people of the region suffer and die, you know, because of Zionism, because of the state of Israel. And so for me, I wanted to do more than just make videos and look at the analytics and profit. I wanted to show solidarity. And so that's why I went to Iran. And I think the Iranian people, the people of southern Lebanon, the people of Yemen, the people of Gaza, they've suffered a lot, and they're incredibly brave. And I'm very grateful and blessed to have just partaken, you know, and shown solidarity with them, even in the smallest way. So I appreciate you for giving me that feedback.
Well, but given me so much criticism, let me just end with this observation that you are from Iraq. You left Iraq as a baby right after Iraq was destroyed by United States in a moment of unilateral world order coming to existence in our early 90s. I'm from Iran, and we both live outside our countries. In 80s, these two countries were fighting against each other. Now there are two sides of Axis of Resistance. So I think the future is much more bright, and especially in this region. I'm sure sooner than we imagine, this region will be liberated. The moment that other parts of the region realize that, and that consciousness and that awakeness spread around them, I'm sure the same that Iraqis, Lebanese, Palestinians, when that spread to Jordanians, to Turks, to Egyptians, and to other parts, I'm sure that moment will come.
Inshallah. All right. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
If you liked this podcast discussion, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, please consider becoming a channel member. Don't forget to follow Ali's channel, Jadal, on YouTube. The link is in the bio of this video. Thanks for watching, and as always, take care of yourselves.